Hi, my name is Xiaowen Zhu. I'm the Director of Center for Chinese Contemporary Art in Manchester, the UK. Today, I'm delighted to introduce our guest speaker, Brigitta Varadi. In this lecture titled Matting, Felting, Bonding, Brigitta will reflect on her multimedia practice, which interweaves art and craft, labor and heritage, personal healing and community building. Since 1998, Brigitta has been working with natural wool as a medium to study and connect with marginalized people, following her own trajectory as an immigrant who has moved continually across borders and cultures. I have had the pleasure of getting to know Brigitta through the Civitella Ranieri residency in central Italy, where we currently are. And we were both invited as fellows of visual arts. I was immediately struck by Brigitta's passion and dedication to working with marginalized communities while pronouncing invisible labors and belittled traditions. There's an underlying connection between Brigitta's practice and CFCCA's mission, which is to foster cross-cultural exchanges between the UK and the world through forward-thinking visual arts programs that increase the visibility of underrepresented artistic practices. So without further ado, let's welcome Brigitta to take us on a journey investigating themes of sustainability and cultural heritage through a combination of research, material experimentation, and community workshops. Brigitta's presentation will last for about 45 minutes. Afterward, we will chat about her practice and the new work in progress.
So thank you so much for inviting me for this lecture series, and thank you everybody who is spending their time to joining this talk. I would like to start the presentation with some memories from my childhood that started this journey. Okay, so I would like to talk, I just would like to say a few words before I start to talk that the structure of the presentation will be, I will talk a little bit about my obsession with wool and where it's originated from. Then I will talk influences on my practice, 3 major influences on my practice, introducing a little bit of my practice. And then I talk a little bit about community workshops and also my own practice involving with the community. And then my current job, what I'm doing at the moment, and then the current work. So let's start. So I was 16 years old when I first went to a class in a community center, which called felt making. I didn't know much about it. Felt making, if you haven't heard, it's sort of predating spinning, weaving. It's coming really from Central Asia, but also Finland and other parts of the world, they developed it. It's a very ancient way to work with textile and material, to compress the fibers and layer on top of each other. So I was a very, very sick child, and I brought up by my grandmother. So I wasn't really to go too many places, but here my grandmother allowed me to go age of 16. So the first time I touched this fluffy wool, and they showed me how to create and they teach me and how to learn and how to create my first ever piece, my whole body awakened. I was alive. It was so much sensory experience for me, who was like an asthmatic, allergic, very weak child, that I just became mesmerized by the technique, by the material. Also, if you haven't done felt making before, it's a technique that you can create something within an hour and take it home with you. So it's very, very satisfactory experience. So, and my obsession and my journey with wool started at the age of 16. And it took me years and years working with people in the community, because I just wanted to share my experience with everybody else. And as a feedback from the people working with them, I started to develop my own practice. So the influences that made me my practice today what it is and who I am today, it's first of all, it's the felt making, which is what I learned from Mongolian and Kyrgyz women later on in my life, it's that Central Asian nomadic practice. And also what struck me in their practice was the community element. So in the plains of Mongolia, in traditional time, women came together in springtime. So it's a nomadic community. So every family lives their own and they travel with their animals. And then in springtime, the community comes together, all of the families comes together, the men doing their sports and exchange, while the women creating these felted woolen blankets to create a yurt circle of a house and give it and donate it and give it to a newly wedded couple in the community. So all of the women comes together after sharing the sheep and the yaks, and they work together. And it's a very labor intensive process, but also very monotonous. So they share their life and what's happened last year, who gave birth. So it's become like exchange. And then the giving part of giving it away to the newly wedded couple. So that's really, really influenced me, not only the felting process, but also the act of giving and working together and sharing. So I'm just going to show you one project, which was a direct outcome of this sharing and working together. So it was 2004 in Sligo Island when I was working, and I worked with 16 community groups, including schools, older people, art centers, disadvantaged community, rapid areas, and everybody created one single felted flower, and we put it into one group and came together to celebrate and exchange. There was 405, I think, flower in this installation. And there's some of the work done by elder people, some of the work done by schools. And you can see, I went into like several schools with a few other people and worked with them. And then we put it together ourselves. So there's a detail things of those flowers. It was so much fun because this was the first time everybody made, and so it was a learning process, but also a creating process, and became like a community project. The second influence on my practice was the technicality. So it's a very technical, detailed craftsmanship. Once you learn it, it's very easy to make. But once you want to develop your own practice, the technicality steps in, and then I needed to train myself to go around the world and learn from people. And I remember, this is a story I really would like to share because it's also funny, but it's made me very, very proud. I was invited as a key speaker to a FELT conference in Turkey, to the Marmara University 2011. So the traditional felt makers, which is in Turkey and Iran, it's inherited family tradition and the business. And I was the only one who wasn't a traditional felt maker, and I was the key speaker. So Mehmet and Selçuk, the two very famous, amazing felt makers coming from traditional family, came to me and said, "Why am I invited? Why am the key speaker?" And I said, "What do you mean that?" And they said, like, because I am small, I am a woman, I'm not from Turkey. And the organization and complained. And the organization told me, I just told them, just wait until I finish my presentation. So after my presentation, they came to me and told me, I am totally crazy. That was, I think, the biggest compliment I ever got. Because for me, it's meant that they really valued and saw the craftsmanship, the technicality in my work. So I'm just going to show you one of the piece I presented on that symposium, which was a public art commission by the Irish government for the Department of Education Science. So this piece was extremely technical. It took me 9 months to make, and fluff by fluff from this wool. And it was like a piece that I had to apply for it, and it went for 2 stages, and the community selected the work, and the community request was about a town and the medieval theme. So for me, medieval theme was also the land and protecting the land. And so I created this Google map view of the Shannon River going into Loch Allen, and I scaled it. So everything, all of the island, all of the shores, everything is in scale. And you can see some of the some of the scale here, that it was super large. And it took me 9 months to make it, and you some of the process here, flop by flop. Excuse my images, because that was before I had digital camera. So that's when I felt technically I arrived, and I could just force the material and bend it and smash it and create whatever I want with it. And then the third influence in my practice, which is one of the deepest influence I have, it's my grandmother. And I keep going to talk a lot about my grandmother because, first of all, she brought me up. And second of all, I didn't really see the influence until the last few years of her culture and of her being. And now I realize how much it's influenced me. She's from the Carpathian Mountain. So she's not Hungarian, she's Carpato-Rusin. It's a very small ethnic group within a country. They spread over different countries living on the mountain. And their craft involves wool and involves weaving, spinning, felting, and creating these beautiful rugs. And I remember spending the childhood with my grandmother in these mountain villages and like sort of jam between these beautiful rugs and really furry and colorful, amazing rugs. And somehow I forgot it. And it's just a few years ago started to come back to my memory that how much it's influenced me. And I realized that influence. So this piece share is direct outcome of my relationship with my grandmother. After she passed away, I started to work a lot around her and about her, and not directly with the culture, but just my memory. And I created this Golden Rod project. It's a project that I never really thought that I would do. I created 1,000 tea bags and packaged them. I created the box and the labels and screen printed them and created a pop-up tea shop and hosted tea parties everywhere. So I just went around with my tea and my 2 poofs and invited people to have tea with me. And this is one of the pop-up tea shop. You can see the goldenrod, the plants dye the wool. So I just wanted to give a sensory experience and then work with wool here too. And then you can see in the background the tea boxes. So how the project came about, when my grandmother passed away, I remembered that growing up with always some kind of tea brewing. She always went to collect her own plants and made her own tea, and also put it up on the stove, made her own tinctures and cream. So the smell was always everywhere in the house, and always visually I could just see all this white sheet in the loft drying all of these herbs. And when I asked her about it, she said, you know, when I retired, all of these memories started to come up, that my godmother was the midwife in the village, and she used to make all of this tea and tinctures and cream, and she was sort of looked after the whole village. So when she retired, my grandmother, she started to remember and started to do it. So then I was in New York, upstate New York, and I walked. Like it was 2 years after her death, and I walked in the countryside and I came across this golden field. The sun just hit that field and I was mesmerized by the color. It was gold vibrating, and it's really struck me. So I started to research the plant, and it was goldenrod. And I went very deep researching it. It was a tea that after the Boston Tea Party, they had, you know, the Native American advice to the community that you can make tea out of goldenrod with some herbs and lavender and dried fruits, but basically they manufactured goldenrod tea. So there was a tea element to it, and I really liked the whole tea element to it because it's related to my grandmother. So, and I started to go and learn and teach myself how to make tea. So pick them, dry them, crumble them. I ordered organic tea bags. I filled them up, and I created these labels, which created 1,000 labels and numbered them 1 to 1,000. So each tea bag became a piece of art, and it was numbered. I signed it, and then I made a goldenrod drawing for each label by hand. And these are the boxes I screen printed. And these are some of the details, shots of the tea parties I hosted. And the whole magic for me was, it's become my grandmother. My grandmother loved hosting people and loved feeding and giving people. And I think here the tea party become like a connection of a start of conversation. So people who never knew each other, they sit down and they look at the tea and they started to talk about the tea. And then in the end, everybody stayed for 2, 3, 4 hours and started to have amazing conversation with each other, which nothing was to do with the tea any longer. So I really loved the conversation part of the project and how people connected through this project. And I was invited to different galleries to host this tea party. And I started to make cakes with goldenrod and started to feed people and started to host more and more of these tea parties because people just really enjoy just to sit down and get to know each other. And for me, that was sort of the conversation element was for me the very important part of this project. So, and now I'm just going to show a few of the community art projects that I did in Ireland. I was very lucky as a young artist moving to northwest of Ireland in Sligo, where the art officer Mary McAuliffe started a new program around 2000, 2001, creating a budget for artists and connecting artists with older people. And it was the rural West Island. So it meant a lot of people lived outside of small villages in middle of nowhere, and a lot of people couldn't drive. So isolation was a huge issue. So once a week they were brought into the center, they picked up by a community bus, and then I went to work with them. And I worked with one group, Gurchin Women's Group, for a year, 3 years actually, 3 years. And I worked with several other older people group all over County Sligo, County Leitrim, and Roscommon. And for me, what was interesting working with the older people is how much they enjoyed and experienced the same joy when I was 16 years old and I touched the wall, and how much people come alive when they start doing the felt making. It's such a sensory experience. And you see here the Kiju, it was near to the village where I lived in Ireland. The Kiju group, they worked on a collaborative wall piece. And the conversation to creating this wall piece was very interesting. And also when we are making the work, then this monotonous action was very interesting to listen, the conversation that these felt making, rhythmic action created, and how people went back into the memory to share their childhood, their adulthood, or different stories about their life to each other. So you can see a little bit of here in the first image was rolling and matting the wall. The second image here, making the design and making sure nothing is moved. And the third image, the participant decided they would like to stitch and embellish and a little bit do some beadworking on the top of the felt piece when it was ready. I wish we had like a creative writer who would record and write a book about all of those stories which came up during this workshop. This was in a nursing home with like 90 years old people, which meant that I had to be really thinking how to bring in the textile. So what we did like a big piece together, and I felted it at home, and then participants put the wool out. And I'm just showing this slide because she was nearly 100 years old, that lady in the blue jacket. And then she kept making it, and she kept going back to it, going back to it, going back to it. And I said, what are you making? And she told me that amazing story about her childhood when she was on the bicycle and went into this hawthorn bush. You can see the red berries there. And she got really hurt. And how she was crying and her clothes was torn and crying and was running home to her mother and was expecting a hug and expecting to be, taken care of. And her mother really scolded her that she's a bad girl and she should go and clean up, and she destroyed her clothes. And this woman like made me cry because I think the soft wool, the soft felt, being together, sharing these stories with each other, she just worked on that piece for like days and days and days and just keep going back. And then she worked on another piece. You see the yellow one, these were the hay that was a child, and the young woman, she collected and created this haystack. And she kept talking about all of it. So that was really, really beautiful. And I started to understand that it's not only Mongolia, the traditional felt maker, it's this exchange of stories and storytelling. But the material and the technique is somehow provides a platform for us to share and engage. So there's just other images working with older people, all different counties in Ireland, and sometimes singular pieces, sometimes group pieces. Then we started to connect older people to the younger generation, especially in areas where it was 1970s, 80s, 1990s East States, where older people became isolated from the younger generation. So we brought them together, the young and the old, to work together, which was also really, it's really amazed me that the stories, the people came back in every week, and the older people started to say, you know, I met with this young artist, I was working on this piece together, and he helped me, and he ran to me and said hello and helped me to carry my luggage, my shopping bag to home. And all of the young people was like really happy to get to know the old woman. So this conversation started, and the community started to bond because of the generational gap was sort of closing. And through the working together on one piece and sharing that experience, people met. I also was very lucky that Conti Roscommon started to set up artist in school residency. So I work in 3 months in each school and with each classes. So these are the smaller classes that they are learning felt making. And then with the older students, we did like community work, they had to design and create one piece. So the conversation, what would be the subject of the piece, how we create it, and everybody needed to agree. So itself, it was a journey to come to a piece that everybody is super happy and invested in it. And you can see the several larger scale works we are working on it. And here is the process, what I use to create a conversation to design one piece, group piece together, is through drawing and through exchange. So everybody do their individual drawing, they try to put and commit together, and then I facilitate a conversation. And then when everybody's super happy with the result, then we go into the textile and start to create. This is a project I created between Finland and Sligo, an island. So Oulu, North Finland, and then Sligo Island. I work with 2 schools and work with ancient history, Stone Age history, and both of the schools where we were researching and taking patterns and design. And then we created these installations with it, and we exchanged the work. So we exhibited both work in Finland, and we exhibited both work in Ireland, and the children sent letters and thoughts about their project to each other. This was, I think, in Finland, in one of the schools. So we created these large panel pieces, and we went to see a museum. We were drawing, the kids were drawing, the children were drawing, and they decided on their own pattern, and they together created the longer pieces. So this is installed in Finland, and this is, I think, the Finnish children. Excuse my images, this was such a long time ago that my camera wasn't that good that now. So this is the work that I really, really love doing. And this is a new phase of my practice that started in 2012. I was invited to teach in prison, in Irish prison. And again, Ireland has an amazing education system in the prison, and also the Art Council of Ireland teamed up with the prison education system to provide visual artist residencies. So a visual artist, a professional artist, invited to do like a 2-3 weeks project. So the participant will have an experience, not just their daily art teacher, but somebody professional come in and work with them. And this, because I cannot take photos in the prison, all of the images taken by officers or the other teachers with their cameras. So I can show, it's not that good, but I think you will understand. The first few years, we were working on individual work with the prisoners, they become very proud of it, and they were sending it home to their parents, girlfriend, mother, and they really, really took care. So they become my best student. They were making bags, slippers, hat, baby boots, and they were very, very proud of them. And they were just all of the feedback, how much their family loved it. And then after a while, after a few years, I was suggesting if we could do a big project, like a community, like a group project. And it was a little bit difficult, but in the end, it was magic, because they all had to come together and decide of the team. So facilitating that conversation, it took like maybe 3-4 days, like full long days to pull out ideas, noted the ideas on a paper, and then started to negotiate. And when everybody was happy, then we arrived and everybody was dedicated to the project. And this is the outcome of the project. And I will show you some the technical details after. So this piece meant to be viewed at night. This is how they designed it, with a light inside. So when the light is inside and it's not daylight, you will see some invisible patterns also in the materials. And but I cannot stay in the prison for that long. And also it went for an exhibition, and then, yeah, so it was a little bit difficult to document the project, but here is a few documentation. So the became a very, very complex project. Also, it looks simple, but after the negotiating and deciding on the design, I had to create the design. So I had to draw out the patterns, and it was almost like pattern. I had to draw out everything, cut it around, and then create a half felt, a softly felted black woolen material, handmade, then pin down the cutout design, cut it around. So it was very labor intensive, very complex, and then put it on the white wool that they laid out. So making these felted panels, it took time and took a huge amount of effort and teamwork. And then the felting process and the matting process started. So we had 5 panels, and each panel had to be made separately. And here we are we stitch 3 panels together. And now you can see, we just did a sample. You can see when you lit the light behind the black felted fabric, you will see these hearts in it. And you can see how the heart was created and designed, and some of the process of working. So it took us like 3 weeks to make the piece, and it's 3 weeks of 8 hours every day. Now I would like to talk a little bit about how, from teaching in a community, led my own artistic practice to start to work with the community in collaboration as my own work. So I keep talking about conversation, and conversation was for me extremely important, to listening into the conversation, what was happening during the process. And so I started to have conversation with my neighbor farmers, with my sheep farmers. I knew their wife, their process, what are they doing with the wool, what's happening. And I was selected into an artist residency program that the theme was locality. What does it mean being local for you? So for me, I had to think about it, because that time I was going back to Hungary to exhibit. I was going a lot to the States, and I was living in Ireland. So I created this conversational piece in conversation with the farmer, with myself. And it's layered together my Hungarian background. I created this mattress out of hay or straw. Out of straw. And it's combined for me, that mattress, that two things my grandmother always said, like, I am happy when I go to bed and the duvet and the bedding smells of sunshine. And it's really struck a chord. It really struck a chord to me. So I created this mattress in hope it will smell like sunshine when you lay on it, because the smell of the hay. And also there was a tradition in Hungary before the war, they were people had mattress made out of straw or hay. And I asked them what's happening, because you have to keep changing to refresh the hay in it. What happened with the hay? Did you put it in the compost or in the garden? They said, no, we had to burn it because our bed and worries goes into the mattress, so we have to burn it. That was for me, it's just explains so much. I fall in love with the whole idea of creating your own mattress and refreshing your own bed, and how represented me, where I'm coming from. And then certainly the wool, which was coming from my neighbors at the mountain sheep wool from Benedict Gallagher, represented me embedded in the rural Irish landscape. And then it's a Donald Judd daybed by centimeter. I copied it, but I dressed it up softly and warmly. So, and then this piece became a conversation. And also this piece became like a cornerstone for my practice, because I created this piece as a symbolic conversational piece, but people were so drawn to it and sit on it, lay on it. First, it shocked me because this is a sculpture in my head. And then after I was like pulled back and observed people's reaction to the work, and I understood that work needs to be touched, it needs to be used, it needs to be lived in. So I gave it to the community to have it as a conversational piece. And this work, and working with Benedict Gallagher, the sheep farmer, and working with his wool, gave me a window and a way into the local community. And I started to ask questions because I was intrigued. I'm not from Ireland, and I see all of these beautiful sheep painted. And so I started to ask questions like, what are these paints? And they started to explain, and it's become a little bit more complex what I was expecting. And it's just piqued me. So I started to have more and more questions, and I work with 6 farmers from 3 different counties, and I work with their wool. So each wool is a different, like always sheep wool, Texel sheep wool, mountain sheep wool, and the texture you will be able to see that. And I also documented the project, video and interviews. And the whole project really started because of these colorful marking. And instead of there is the sheep farmer persist of using their old traditional marking, which passed down from generation. But they also use the ear tag, which has to be by law. But for visibility and easy working, they just use these colorful patches on their animals. So this is from Noah Ruana, who's a mountain sheep farmer. This is Bridie Moran, is a lowland sheep farmer. And you can see the empty circle here also in Lorraine Brennan work. It's represent sorry, my slides are jumping. It represents there is no, the sheep is not pregnant. So you can see the empty circles, it shows no pregnancy. The 6 circle shows ownership marking. The little circles showing different medication mark and different marking system that the farmer used to able to see what was done with the sheep. Now also they have mating marks to see who is the father of that sheep. And then also in that big exhibition I also created an interactive piece, which wasn't a sofa any longer. It was a box that invited people to sit, to stand in it, and to observe. And based on the little huts that the sheep farmer have in the mountain, if the weather gets very bad, to hide in it, like, from the elements. I also created this installation room that that the video and the interview was projected. I wanted to give a feeling back to the viewer. They are standing, talking with the sheep farmers and looking at and observing the sheep. So Benedict Gallagher shared a lot with me. And also for me, it was very moving because after so many months of conversation, he asked me to, this is Benedict Gallagher and his son, he asked me to record all what he told me because he realized he hadn't told that to his son. And now his son is emigrated to Australia. And he wanted to record all what he remembers from his grandfather's sheep farmer practice to father and his own sheep farmer practice. He showed me all of that marking system and all the different ways that he doesn't use any longer, but he kept it as a memory from his father and grandfather. And
the markings we have is generally red over the tail. We used to have red on the horns as well. We kind of dropped that since tagging came in. But the man next door would have blue over the tail and red over the shoulders. Every farmer would have his own mark. So as you could easily identify them on the mountains, as there isn't no fencing in this area. And the sheep will mix, so you can see them from a distance. Yeah, shearing the sheep is one of the hardest jobs you have to do with them, shearing and dipping, but mostly shearing it's slow. Generally, I need help. Usually one of my sons actually helped me. We run around 350 to 400 sheep on the mountains.
So that was just a little snippet from Benedict video and interview, which I recorded because he requested it. And I think we became like a longtime friend, and I started to record in my next project, and recording is becoming part of my project now, which I learned from Benedict. And here is a little bit of how I make the work, this large-scale hand-felted work. I usually create a costume table out of plywood and legs, and I create each piece in one go and in one piece. I use silk fabric, layer it with fine merino, and then layer it with the raw wool and compress it together. And it's a very physical process, and it takes like a week to make one piece. And then for example, for this sheep marking project, I hanged the work. And then I went and created and used the same paint and the same marking system what the sheep farmer used. So it was just the day before the exhibition, I painted on the already installed work. This is another work, which is one of my newest work, and it's to do with sheep wool, but I would like to also introduce a little bit of clay and a little bit of the other body of work that I'm working and how I am working. This is the Burlington City Arts Center commissioned me for a research-based community project, and in collaboration with the Shelburne Farm. And the outcome was 2 big panels using sheep wool. I also did some interviews, some video pieces, but what for me really captured me is working with the clay tiles. I'm just going to show you a few images here. So these are the clay tiles that are created. It's around 2,000 clay tiles. And the story which captured me to creating these clay tiles was the tiles itself. It's a very, very old house. And one of the person who worked there, Julie, was telling me a story which totally captured me, that when in one of the bathrooms in this old house, which is a heritage house, they had a water leakage. So they had to pick up all of these tiles and to repair the damage. And Julie was so heartbroken because these tiles come from 1800, porcelain tiles made in Philadelphia and in a factory. And she was heartbroken, and she said, okay, it's so many tiles, it's a few thousand tiles, and you know what, I'm going to clean it up so we can put it back, or we just need to throw it out. So she started alone cleaning hundreds and hundreds of tiles. And then she kept talking about this process, and then people said, oh, I come and help and clean. So there was just a community kept coming together every week and helping her to clean 3,000 tiles. And she said she made, I think she cleaned herself 1,000, and then the community helped her to clean another 2,000. So then after they could put the tiles back on the floor. So for me, it's really captured my imagination, because this place was the center where the craft and the craft movement originated, and where the cottage industry becomes something else and become design. So I wanted to go back and investigate the craft and the cottage industry a little bit by myself and through my body. And so I looked around in the Shelburne farm and I find really good clay. So we dig clay up, and I transported all of the clay back to my studio. And I started to experiment how to create a clay body that actually works from the digged up clay. And I arrived to investigated a lot of traditional culture, how they make clay, instead of buying it in the shop in the old time, how to dig clay, how to knead clay. So I created this 19 minutes video, which represented the slow process of traditional craft. And this is just a little bit of showing of kneading the clay and creating the clay body. It took me 6 months to experiment and arrive to a clay body which wasn't cracking, and it was suitable to making tiles. But I repeated this process so many times and created so many batch of clays. And the video was capturing every element of the making and the repetitiveness of the making. So. And also you can see I was like trying to create a little bit of manufacturing here in my studio, and worked usually 200 or 300 tiles at the same time. And each tile was numbered. And here is showing the process of experimenting with the clay body and trying to create the tiles and trying to create the body itself. And then I got a residency in the Museum of Art and Design, which was perfect because the residency is there for the visitors to come into the artist studio and engage with them. And I thought this project would be a perfect to work in the Museum of Design, because I could invite people to work with the clay, and we can talk and explain how, sustainable in the old time the craft and creating object were. And for me, it was really amazing to see how people just came into the museum to look at work, and they end up in my studio and started to create tiles. And then we have people who requested to come back, so they will get a free ticket and they come back and make like 10, 15 tiles with me. And you can see each tile was numbered, and I created this sign sheet so we can record everybody's name who created a tile. And you can see just some images here, people coming into my studio making tiles. And then you can see on the wall the experimentation with the Shelburne Farm wall. I was making samples to creating those large wall pieces. And then we organized in Shelburne Farm itself like a big open day, and invited everybody. Actually, it was 2 days, invited everybody to come and join and make tiles and have a conversation with us. So I think the tile making just become a platform to create the conversation. And we had so much fun, and I just couldn't believe how many tiles we made. And then end of that 90 minutes video, which documents each segment of the making, it's all everybody's name written who made a tile. And this is one of my last slides here. And there's so much body of work I have done the last more than 20 years that I only showed a few segments that was very, very important for me. It was a cornerstone to change my way of thinking or really fed into the way I am working at the moment. And what I'm doing at the moment, I'm a director of a artist residency program in upstate New York, which the company called Chashama, and it's giving space to artists to create, to exhibit, like studio spaces, exhibition spaces. And here in upstate New York, we have this maximum 7 artists, 5 to 7 artists, very small intimate residency program, where I create a programming to help emerging artists to work and live together. So for me, as an emerging artist, I was thinking like how much people helped me and what was the help which brought my understanding what I'm doing or put my work out into the front. So I'm trying to create a program that it helps that. So we create networking possibilities and opportunities for the artists. We invite studio visitors, critics, curators, galleries. We do field trips, and we try to connect the artists as many people as possible while they are with us. And we also provide food, which I think it's the connection, creates this intimate connection, sharing and eating together. And this is in middle of the countryside, rural countryside, so it's extremely beautiful and relaxing place. And some of the studios here for the artists. And then also we provide a group show in New York City in the main organization, galleries and venues, and a solo show for the artist. And here is some of our artists. Chen Wang, who is amazing video artist, and also I think running a residency program, you create so many friendships and so many connections that it's keep feeding you. And we are very old-time friends now with Chen. Chen was with us 2018, and Jin also. I absolutely fall in love with his work. He was in our last group show. He's from South Korea. His work is amazing. And it's really, really nice to keep meeting and our connection keep growing deeper and deeper with these artists. Gaku was with us, a Japanese artist, 2018. Kyung I met 2014 in another residency, and she was very interested to come. And we are all-time friends and we support each other. So I think a residency program create that safe environment and safe community for artists to engage and develop friendship. And Jia Wang, who was with us 2018. I think that's it. Thank you so much. I think, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Brigitta. Thank you for the very comprehensive presentation. So many inspirations and ideas, and also, your personal trajectory, but also how it interweaves, with different communities all around the world. I see that we're already getting some questions from the audience. But maybe I'll let the audience, let's give the audience some time, to reflect, and we will get to their questions. I also have a few questions, following your presentation.
Okay.
I wonder if we can, just delve into it. I think my first question has to do, with the origin of all of your artistic practice. It makes me think of what you mentioned, growing up as a child in isolation, this craving, for warmth, for the sense of people connection. Can you talk a bit of that, how your understanding of isolation has changed, also throughout your practice, and especially how do you understand it now, post-COVID?
Yeah, post-COVID. That's a good question, because I think Civitella created the safe environment for me to realize a lot of things about my practice. And I think the COVID situation was to, again, being in isolation, like in my childhood, which was very, very hard for me. Then I realized how much my childhood fed to my practice and why I am working. And I think when you grow up as a child, and I think my grandmother was also overprotective, total isolation and not able to go there with the group or do really anything, you have this huge craving to be with people and to share. Because I think I was just reading and felting all the time alone at home. And the COVID, the pandemic made me realize the need to be with people and the need to share. And I think because I was very sick and very alone, for me to listen to people, my need was to listening to people and to understand people, because I wanted to know everybody, because I was so, until the age of 18, I was just in this bubble. And for me to understand to people, I needed to listen. And it's just, I don't know, I just immersed myself in working with community. And because I think I'm an immigrant, it's, for me, it was easier to work with the different communities, because I was coming as an outsider and they wanted to share with me because I didn't know. And that interaction started and the conversation started. But for me, I just wanted to know everything about everybody and about the whole world. And after post-COVID, these things I never really realized about my practice, only after COVID. And only really hearing that when I started this working, it's how much I have a need to be with people and having a conversation and listening to their stories.
Great, thank you so much. Then I guess the next question, it kind of interweaves one of the questions from our audience member. It is about, this sense and longing for community, but also you are someone who always moves in between communities, which also comes with thrill and challenges, So how do you establish new relationship with a particular place, especially a new place? And how do you build this trust? What's that, process like? As I can imagine, sometimes it can take, longer than expected.
Yeah, it's, in the beginning, it was a long process, but I think it's also acquired knowledge, how to connect to people through practice. So especially moving to rural community, and you have to give time and space, and you have to be the one who is pulled back and observe and ask questions. And the gap of integrating into new communities became smaller and smaller and smaller. And I think it's because of listening and contributing to the community is creating that bridge.
Yes, do you mind to give us an example about, listening to the community? Because I think we also, in our education, we're always told, to be a good listener. But what is it like, in practicality, especially, not every community, they welcome you just automatically, right?
No, it's, so I give you two samples, which is when I was very young and then later on. And I think it's just hard to put it in words. So when I was very young, we moved from, I'm a small town girl, into the middle of nowhere, into a small village. And, we got animals, we want to be like self-sufficient farmers. We didn't ask questions, we just bought a house, we moved in, we renovated, we got the animals, and then we were there. Now the community went like this, except an old couple who really saw our trying effort to gain something back from the past and try it ourselves. And they really appreciated being like super young people, 24 years old people trying this way of living. But the community totally rejected us and we had to move. And so the next time we moved in Ireland from the town to the countryside, it was again very hard. It took years because there was no listening and no conversation because we were middle of nowhere in an old Irish cottage. But then when I moved to the other side of that town, I went a lot into the town. I started to ask questions, have a conversation with the local shop, make sure I sit in a coffee shop once a week. So I started to make effort to be seen and to be in the community and to start to joining different clubs. And then here in America, when we arrived to this rural countryside, we just followed the same pattern and went into the coffee shop. I think it's very important for the local community to see you, want to be part of it, but not verbally, but physically. So physically going everywhere, sitting in a coffee, using the local post office, using the local bank, using everything local, and then wait until you get the first smile. And then from there, create the connection. And now when I go into Pine Plains, that's where I live, into the shop, the shopkeeper is like, oh my God, Brigitte, you bring the best, the loveliest people into our community. So I think listening is just with your body, be in the community and make sure that you contribute towards the community by buying your food there, by using the bank, using their post office, and be visible until the community start to see you. And once they see you, they smile at you and you smile back, and then you ask questions.
That was beautifully put and very heartwarming. Thank you, Brigitta. My next question has to do with technicality, labor, which, you know, I think they play a big role in your own practice as an artist, but also we see them, you know, as kind of almost recurring threads throughout all those workshops you have done, you know, with people in different communities. And also I noticed that in your presentation, you very often mention the hours, you know, and also a certain material, a certain technique or skill that you spend hours, days, months, you know, to acquire. Can you talk a bit about, you know, this attention, you know, to technicality, to crafts, as well as, you know, how they inform and transform your workshops with your participants?
So I think everything goes back to my loneliness and my childhood, because when I got physical with the fad, I became alive. So I experienced through my body, what does it mean making? And any project I do, even the current project, I am putting my whole body through that physical work and labor intensiveness, but also because my grandmother was such a hardworking woman who supported her family, get up 5 a.m. and she just worked and worked and worked and had her garden, and we ate her food like 12 months a year. Her work ethic and her work and her whole body was given to it. For me, it was magic. I'm not saying, you know, I never had a fight with her. We were like that all the time, and it's two generations apart. But she was a very big influence of my work. So when I do the clay work, when I do the mattress, I really train myself, and I really put my whole body through to experience that labor intensiveness and experience what that process does to your body, because that's how people did it in the old time, and that's how they lived. And I want to experience that and see the effect emotionally on my psyche. I don't even know the words in English, like put myself in other people's life, but also I love the physicality work. And I love experiencing that hard labor, and I really push my body. And then when my body starts to break down, I know I arrived. I don't know, does it make any sense?
Yes, I think it makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Great. I think there are some really fascinating questions from the audience. So I'm going to read a couple of them. One question is, thank you, it was an amazing presentation. I wonder what is your favorite type of wool and whether different types of wool give different reactions and emotions. That's an excellent question.
Yes, yes, different reaction, different emotions. You are exactly right. I love merino. This is where I learned felt making. It's the softest. It's. I don't know. Yeah, it's beautiful. Merino is beautiful, soft, warm, tactile, comforting. But one of my favorite wool is in Ireland, the mountain sheep wool. Benedict Gallagher, Noel Ruana, those Ox Mountain sheep wool, which is just found in one area that Benedict Gallagher farmer grandfather brought him from County Mayo. And because it was so many generations living in this mountain, it's become its own breed. Now that wool is long, raw. It awakes something in you that you become like, I don't know, your gut feelings opens up. You become very raw, very full on energy and very, I don't know the words. It's really transforms your whole being working with that wool. It's so primal that when I work with it, and I want to all the time work with it, but I don't live in Ireland any longer, but I was just like, I want to be with Benedict. I want to be in his farm and with his wife and then just work in their farm. And that rawness, that elemental energy, what is in that wool, it's magic.
Thank you, Brigitta. The next question is about in the way that communities learn how to felt and create with you. In what ways do you feel that you have also learned from the communities?
I learned a lot because this is the project, what I'm doing here is actually embodiment, the conversation. Because for me, the conversation which was happening during the making was the most important thing, which I never recorded or never did anything with it, but I shouldn't even have, because that's the natural conversation which comes out, which was the magic for me. But now it's fed in, and finally, it's made the turning point in my practice that my work is now the conversation itself. And I think that's one element. And the other element is the conversation connects people. So all of this community workshop, what I did, most of the people didn't know each other. And I like working on a large scale group work because it's initiated so many conversations and a little bit of fights, about deciding what elements, what not, and facilitating that conversation of finally arriving to an idea that every participant are super happy and dedicated to make it, because they had to be dedicated because it's such a hard process to create in a large scale. And then the conversation during the making, that's when the magic happens. And that's when friendship develops. That's where the network and the connection flow. And then people will create this connection for years to come, and they will meet each other and they will work with each other.
Great. And then another question is, thank you for the talk. I saw the video on CFCCA's Instagram. So, your work in progress. Can you speak more about it and your work in progress at your current residency?
Okay, so, I lost you.
Can you still, did you hear?
Can you see the slideshow or not really?
We can hear you.
Okay, I hear you. Okay, so as I said, this piece or this installation is really a conversation I realized with myself, a conversation with Angela. Angela is the title of the project, and the second title of the project, We Are Not Meant to Be Seen. And it's about this little piece. So exploring tradition, exploring women and femininity and women in the traditional society, we came across through conversation with about this little piece, which is filled with salt and very roughly made. And the purpose of this piece was to give it from granddaughter grandmother to granddaughter, grandmother to mother, to put it in the bra to protect the person. So the salt will create the protection, and the red fabric will put the evil spirits away. Now, this is the object itself, but the conversation which came out of this object is about traditional life for women, the invisibility, the work that we do, and all of the work which is not recognized. Like this piece is not meant to be seen. We women in the traditional society were not meant to be seen. We just meant to work, and we are not meant to be show our emotions or our sensuality or our redness. And then the woman had, Angela, a traditional, coming from a very traditional family, what she's saying, and she's locally here from this village, was telling me how hard labor the woman had to do in this country. And I didn't understand it until we went to pick up some wool and worked. I wanted to see the wools and work with it. And it's really, really hard. This is the hardest wool I ever worked with. So I am processing and putting myself through so much physical labor to be able to experience that and cleaning that really, really dirty and rough wool that is very hard to work with, because that's what the woman had to do here, 50, 60, 100 years ago. And because this is red, and we are going to give 200 of these, which I made, I want to create like an installation around Angela, that she's giving these invisible things to people to make it visible and protect people. I want to create an installation. So I'm going to create like a 20, 30 meter long of woolen piece, starting from that raw wool into a fine merino wool, into silk, and surround the whole gallery inside. It's almost like this invisibility red thread connecting us, each of us together as women. At the moment, everything is in work in progress. So, but the whole symbolism of that long piece, which I started to dye red 2 days ago. So some elements are red now, and the whole piece will be red.
That was a really beautiful artist statement. Because Brigitta and I were both at this residency, so I've been very fortunate to see the work in progress on a daily basis. And also we've had, exchanges in about what it was like, to work with the local community, to work with this local woman, work with the local wool, especially before you started the process, you didn't exactly know what to expect. And some quality of it surprised you. In this case, it was a very bad quality, isn't it? That really surprised you. But then you also started just immediately working with it and investigating, questioning, why, in this beautiful, Umbria region in Italy, but what makes the wool so incredibly difficult to work with? And then you told me that was filthy, dirty, basically not taken care of, So I really appreciated those exchanges. It also makes me, rethink some of the perceptions we have of a place, and how much of that perception is shaped by, our personal experience with materials, this, especially our sensual experience. So yeah, I've really enjoyed your presentation, and thank you so much for being with us and answering all of those questions. I hope that our audience have enjoyed this artist conversation. And today's event, I just wanted to mention that is part of exchanges organized by CFCCA. This is a series of public programs to make space for artists and communities as our center, Center for Chinese Contemporary Art, undergoes a period of transformation and growth. Our exchanges also will continue throughout the rest of the year, and encourages collective energies and reflect creative ideas, contributing to a forum of communal expression. If this is the first time you participated in our exchanges program, please get in touch with us through social media channels for more information and updates about CFCCA's transformation. I also wanted to say that on Saturday, next Saturday, 20th of October, we will partner with Viscose Journal for a special event at our building at CFCCA in Manchester, which explores their current issue that deconstructs the notion of Asia through fashion. So stay in touch and hope to see you again soon. And let's thank Brigitta again. And I wish you all the best for your practice and this artist residency that you run in upstate New York.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody joining in and listening. Thank you for the invite.
Okay, bye.
Bye.